Aloha, everyone. This is Tamara McKay with Redtime Stories, your host for today and next week. Anyways, thank you for joining us again this Thursday for episode 21. We're here to talk about what's going on in the community and protect our First Amendment rights and chase out corruption wherever we find it. Today we have Dan Turner back, and we're looking forward to talk about just the issues that are going on within the state of Hawaii. And recently I was elected to a position, so I just want to clarify that this is not sponsored or supported by the Hawaii Republican Party. This is a single operation that is done by myself with no conflict or no influence from any political party. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Dan Turner on. Hey Dan, how's it going?
Very well, and I can tell that you approved that message.
Right.
It's
I just wanted to make
it's
sure
good.
because there'll people be out there. You're the chair,
I
but
know.
this is the platform for people like you to talk about what's going on and to facilitate that as well. Uh,
Yes, and I'm go ahead.
no, the floor is yours. So
Oh,
so what's new
well,
and exciting with you, Dan?
I yes, thank you. I am in similar circumstances to you in that I have my own little disclosure I have to go to. Anything that I say is for
Mhm,
informational purposes only. I talk about investments and strategic planning, asset and wealth management with regard to people's personal and corporate businesses interests. And it's not designed to be construed as tax or legal advice outside of my capacity as an RIAIAREIEIO
mhm.
and registered investment advisory with the state of Hawaii, as well as the Securities Exchange Commission. Purchases, anything that you do, you I can't execute anything over the phone. You have to call with me. I have to have you as a client. I can't just execute. I'm transactional. I am not transactional, excuse me. In other words, I don't have anything to sell. I give advice and I make money through the fees that I charge, the hourly consulting fees, as well as asset management fees. And all of that is negotiable to your extent, because if you're not happy, then you don't want to be my client. So I want you to be happy. But everything is intended to be a projection of, nothing is intended to be a projection or even in any way stated as future performance. It's all opinion. So when we meet face to face, then it becomes a different story. But I'm pleased to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
And what a road show.
What a
It
road
we
show.
saw. Did you see what happened with what was it? Oprah Winfrey and The Rock and these
Yes.
Uber millionaires worth almost, Brazilian Brazilian dollars each in net worth. And they're saying, we were thinking it'd really be nice if we could coax you into giving up money to subsidize stuff that we could pay with, chump change. The money in our couch cushions and ashtray in our car would be enough to rebuild half of Lahaina. But no, you should listen to us and give us your money, and then we'll forward it to the right people so that they can get their homes back. And that's just the incredible level of hubris and arrogance that we have run into. People coming here and thinking that they know more than you do, they know better than you do, and they don't think that we should view anything they say with any level of suspicion. And that's just simply not true. I will agree,
Mhm,
and it is not our cultural norm to be unkind or to be presumptive or to cast aspersions. But when it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks and poops in your yard, it's probably a duck. There are educated guesses that one may take people at their word when people
mhm,
say that they want to convert the burned out areas of Lahaina into a memorial park as a tribute to those poor souls who died in that horrible fire. Oh boy, does that, I know that bothers you all. If you're out there in the
Mhm.
sound of this voice, especially if you're from Maui, I know that bothers you. And if it doesn't bother you, go ahead, go back to sleep. I'll talk a little softer. Hate to wake you, but people are trying to steal from you. And that's the
Mhm.
machination they're using to accomplish that is, the nobility of putting up a memorial park like you would rather have a memorial park that you can walk in than a roof over your head. Maybe they
Yeah.
could design it the way they did the Twin Towers in New York, where what you've got are two deep holes in the ground with those blue lights that shine up into infinity. Yeah, that's much
Mhm.
better than having a roof over your head. I'm just sure that you just don't get it. It's
Mhm.
that's the level of idiocy that we have to deal with here.
Well, it definitely it is looking like land grabs and so forth, and it is a little bit disappointing and disheartening that we do have celebrities, as you said, with deep pockets living in homes that were unscathed, and yeah, asking other people who are disadvantaged or trying to hold on to what they have, that are trying to survive here on Maui. A
Mhm.
couple $1 billion would definitely rebuild Lahaina and give those homes back to those people.
Yeah.
So
And it's not
I
like they don't have the
yeah.
collateral to do it themselves, but the whole point is the government's effort to take it away from them under
Mhm.
this false nobility of doing what's best for the memory of the deceased instead of living people benefiting and getting back on their feet again and getting this thing turned around the right way. Our
And the
leadership is
businesses,
horrible.
yeah. Yeah.
I,
Yeah,
I
it's
just I
definitely challenged. The optics of it is horrible, and the only way that we can do things is if we continue. And I feel that the tide is turning, but we have to keep making bigger waves by unifying and sounding off and
Mhm.
doing something about it. And
Yeah.
when you get pushback, and I know this from experience, is when you get pushback, then you need to push back harder. You can't give up and walk
Mhm.
away, because that's what they want you to do. So
That's why they
I
push.
know that you were yeah. So I know that you were reading into something. Is that something that you wanted to share, as we
Well,
were
yeah.
talking earlier?
Well, I was looking into, and I did this a couple years ago when Ige the Great, or Governor Ige the Mediocre, and Josh Mengele Green uh, were bringing out their August 8th, 2021 rollout of their Mein Kampf concentration camp tactics of control and
Mhm.
essentially shutting down everything. You can't travel without a COVID vaccine. You've got
Right.
mandatory testing. We're going to force people into getting jabbed and poked and everything. And he just, it went downhill for him at that. That's where things started coming off. And I began, what could we, especially because at that time I was over on Big Island. And Mitch Roth,
Mhm.
who, if he had five brain cells that worked, it would be more than he could handle. That would be an overload of the circuits, I'm sure. And Mitch
Mhm.
is a nice guy, but the world's full of nice guys. That doesn't mean we have to elect them, doesn't mean we have to keep them in office. So the question became, how do we get rid of Deadwood like this? And
Mhm.
okay, we can impeach him, but that's not likely because the Democrats who control the legislature are in love with other Democrats who are tyrannical just like they are. But what
Mhm.
we can do, I saw that I think it was the mayoral, for local offices, all you need is 10% of the vote. So if in the 2022 election that put uh, Mengele Green in office, let's say there were 186,000 votes cast. I know there were more, probably. You'd need 18,600 votes to get his butt thrown out of office.
Mhm.
That's not a lot of votes. Now, granted, they have to be wet signatures and they have to be verifiable, and you can't sign up your dog and crazy stuff, but legitimately, it is not outside the realm of possibility that we can get this clown dismissed. And when you look at the totalitarian construct of how they've pushed you around, misled you, lied to you, forced you into compromised circumstances where you gave up your own personal sovereignty to make them happy, it is
Mhm.
just, why wouldn't you? Why would 50% of the vote cast be too much work? You have to
Mhm.
eventually make up your mind of, am I going to live on my knees or stand on my feet?
Right.
And I would rather I would rather go down fighting in that regard. I'll be doggone if I'm going to let a button head like that lead my life and rule it. So
Mhm.
yeah, it doesn't take a lot to recall somebody. It just takes some people to get up and decide they've had enough and start talking to their friends, and so on and so on and so on. Before you know it,
So,
you have a movement, especially now, because at no time that I've been here in the past 8, 9 years has I ever seen anybody as united against the government as I see it right now. And that's not
mhm.
just national, but specifically, I'm talking about Hawaii. People are having voter remorse like I've never seen before. And
Mhm.
so the idea of being able to put things together and start getting some of these clowns out of office and dismissing them, and then, like in the case of Mengele Green, and I have to say this, I have thrown the word Mengele around a few times.
Mhm.
And every now and then, in my own personal conversations with folks, I ask them, are you familiar with Joseph Mengele? And they're not. Especially if you're dealing with
Mhm.
people under 50, you ask them, who is Joseph Mengele? They don't honestly know. They don't have the first idea. Well, let's address that. Joseph Mengele was a scientist in Nazi Germany back during World War II who was stationed at one of the death camps. And I think it was either Treblinka or Dachau. I can't remember which. And his entire purpose was to experiment with vaccines and drugs, and he
Mhm.
used children to test emergency use authorization vaccines that he had invented. And no, there was no such thing in Germany as emergency use authorization, but that's what Green did. Green
Mhm.
did the same thing that Joseph Mengele did in Nazi Germany by forcing unproven, and yes, they were unproven, don't you dare say they weren't, unproven vaccinations on our children. We're going to be looking, and now the truth is coming out every day. More and more of it that we see, cancers that are triple digits over what they were 3 years ago. Deaths are up. And for crying out
Mhm.
loud, the chance of you dying, of surviving an attack of the coronavirus that we're all shuddering over is 99.997% survivability. Three one
Mhm.
thousandths of a percent chance of death if you're under 50. And the chance of dying, or chance of dying if you get the COVID vaccinations of two or more vaccine shots is 4%. You compounded exponentially the chance of dying by getting vaccinated. And that's
Right.
what Mengele was pushing on our children. And now we know with absolute proof that these vaccines in children are causing myocarditis, pericarditis, strokes, nervous conditions, sterility, death. You can go on YouTube and spend the rest of your day watching 2 to 5 second video clips of professional athletes dropping dead on the
Mhm.
field, and they all have one thing in common: they're vaccinated. And that's what Mengele Green has been pushing on our children, our futures. So I think actually there should be probably some kind of Nuremberg response to this, because that is completely illicit. You had no authority under any element of law to force
Mhm.
people into, I got to test every other day or I can take the vaccine and be one of the group. That is incredible, incredible abuse of power.
I know. So, the when you had talked about the recall. So, if you got all these signatures, what's the next step? Then what happens?
Well, I believe that you turn it into the Secretary of State, and
Mhm.
then they go through counting the and verifying and making sure that it's legitimate, and they put it on the ballot. And the ballot is a very simple question. It reads, shall we remove Dr. Mengele Green? And it's a yes or no question. And if the yeses equal 10% of the elected vote that put them in office, then we can have them removed. And I believe it's 10%. I was looking before the show started to verify that sum. And I do
Mhm.
remember at some point in the past that for the governor, it's different. I don't know. But any local officer can be removed. And through the same element, we can go after state officials. It needs to happen. It does need to happen.
So, with that being said, is this something that maybe you're thinking about organizing a group to get these efforts done?
Well, that's a good question. There's a young man, I think, not sure, and he has, yeah, recall. There's a on change.org. You can
Mhm.
find a recall Governor Josh Green for the sake of Hawaii's future. And you can go there and sign this. This is started by Mark Tamosiunas. Tamosiunas, as that's Tamosiunas. And he goes through quite a litany. I think I would love to talk with him and see if I can't add some more material to his punch list, because it's up to 6 now. And he also lists sources, but most of his function is we should get rid of him because of his inappropriate antics with COVID. And oh, by the way, Lahaina was destroyed. I think there's another 6 or 8 just dealing with Lahaina,
Mhm.
but it isn't impossible for us to find this guy and do what we can to support his petition. There has to be, and it doesn't mean we can't start another one, and it doesn't mean that you can't start several and then merge them. Just has to be a percentage of the total vote taken, and we can have
Mhm.
that done. And that doesn't mean it goes before the House and has to be subject to the House regulations and then it goes to this. No, no, it's not like amending the Constitution. It's a yes and no vote. And if it's no, then he stays. If it's yes, then he goes. And then the
You know, with
lieutenant
the
governor would become
Mhm.
governor.
Right, which is that in any better? So,
Well, I don't think so. But you know what? We can we can we can throw them out too. And this becomes a
mhm.
pattern where right now the mental acumen of the average Hawaiian is that, well, we have government and government has us. And whatever government wants to do, we're okay with. because as long as I can feed my family and have a roof over my head and earn a living and blah, 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 then they really don't care. You can't continue to live that way. We have a government that believes that they own us, that we
Mhm.
exist to support the government. I mean, when again, you look at your GE tax certificate, if you're self employed, own a business of any size, you have a general excise tax form that you have to fill out. And that
Mhm.
tax form says on the first line, it is a privilege for you to own a business in Hawaii. Actually, it says it is a privilege for you to have a business in Hawaii. That's not true. Under the federal constitution, the United States Constitution says it's our right to have a business. But that gives you a flavor of how arrogant they are with their
Mhm.
perception of who the citizens are and the role they play in managing the state. And that's before we
Right.
talk about our 10.4 mile train wreck over here in Kapolei to Waipahu that is just untenable. We spend $51 for everybody that gets on the darn train. I mean, when I was growing up, we had my dad hammered this into my head. Dan, when you realize that you're digging yourself into a hole, the only smart thing is to stop digging the hole.
Right. Right.
And that's where we are. But there's just so many different ways and parts of our government where that applies, where they are tyrants. They treat us with complete contempt and disregard, and we don't have to take that.
So, we had a comment in the chat room just saying that back a little bit to the Lahaina thing, saying that the 6 billion that they sent to Iran could have rebuilt everything for the people of Lahaina.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Charity begins at the home, doesn't it?
Hmm.
And why are we supporting a war in Timbuktu that we don't have a dog in that fight?
Hmm.
Well, Biden does. I misspoke. President Biden has
Somebody
a financial
does.
interest. Yes. And, you know, if we break the laundry machine, how are we going to launder our money? We have to think about
Mm,
these things, right?
right. So you had mentioned the change.org, and I've had questions and still have other people. How much how much validity or influence does the change.org hold when they do require wet signatures when you do submit petitions for removal?
I agree with you. I agree completely. That's why I'm saying if some guy on change.org is running this, and if you look at that site and you find his article about
Mhm.
impeaching Josh Green, there's several people who have actually responded to this. It's getting
Mhm.
traction. Now, I agree. You have to be careful when you're doing petitions because wasting your time is wasting your time. It's like peeing in a wetsuit. You get a nice warm
Mhm.
feeling, but nobody ever knows. If you're
Mhm.
going to do a petition, you're going to get signatures. Make sure they're wet signatures. You validate, you look at the driver's licenses, you do everything you can to prove those signatures up front. And now you're getting somewhere. I mean, if you have to get, like in the case I was explaining, you need 18,000 signatures to make this thing float. Why do you want to do it more than once? And if you've got several people who are doing several different petitions, it would behoove them to find a way to connect with each other and
Yeah.
coordinate so that we're now working in concert rather than working in contrast with each other's efforts. Plow the field one time, folks, then you plant your seed.
Right. So, with everything that's going on, it definitely, even though the tragedy happened here on Maui, it does affect everybody statewide, and it will in the end as well, because I can imagine that they're going to use tax codes and whatever they're going to do to charge us. And that's all we are, is charged, just like everyone in the state was charged for the rail, then that doesn't even live on Oahu. Um,
Yeah.
so what, we gotta start looking at the what can we do now to take action. Um, people, like you had mentioned, they're not allowed to get back in their homes. They're not allowed to rebuild, sift through, find wedding rings or precious items. Everybody's blocked out, and if they go in there, they're arrested. So
Right.
what do we do about that?
I don't know. All I do
Mhm,
know is that is illegal. That is still your property. And
mhm,
that gets back to I think Hawaii has this thing that it's better to be safe. Safety is just a paramount virtue here in Hawaii. You never see this back in Cleveland, where it's like, well, you got to be safe. You can't take any chances. You got to be safe. Don't do that. You might get hurt. We need to arrest you because you're not safe. It's nonsense. But
mhm.
Marbury versus Madison, 1803, is pretty clear that unconstitutional law is unconstitutional and it is abhorrent, it is repugnant, it may be ignored. In fact, we have a duty to ignore unconstitutional law. And the problem seems to be that so many people were displaced that it's easier to corral them and herd them
Mhm.
than it is for them to be able to mount any kind of resistance against this oppression.
Well, we know that the Constitution is supposed to be the law of the land, and
Mhm.
many people have tried to fight, in exercising their constitutional rights, especially during 2020 with mask mandates and, vaccine mandates that they kept trying to impose on people. So if we
Mhm.
have the leadership that's not following the Constitution, how do we get past that? How do we fight that? They're being, they're not even following the law and the Constitution that they swore an oath to uphold and defend.
It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government.
And they make it
And that
difficult
simply,
to that.
of course they do. That's because
Yeah,
that's how tyrants roll. But that's
yeah.
also why we have a Second Amendment. And I'm not trying to start an insurrection. We've all seen how that ends. But the fact, I've thought about this a lot lately because the Second Amendment exists exclusively for the benefit of the people to defend themselves from tyrannical government. It's
Yeah,
not about being able to go pig hunting. Okay.
right.
It's not about deer hunting. It's not about sport shooting. It's about shooting your leadership in the head when you can't get them to stop being tyrants. But
Mhm,
you have a kind of a demarcation point where you begin recognizing oppression and you say, hey, stop that. But they don't. And so
mhm,
you say it louder and they don't. And well, you send them letters and they don't stop. And then you go to their offices and they don't stop. And you keep adding to the effort and you become more and more opposed to their oppression by standing up against them. But at some point, you get to the point where you've come to the conclusion they're not going to stop. This is no
mhm,
longer, when you hear people say it's a danger to our democracy, word clue here, folks. It's no longer a democracy, it's an oligarchy. We are living under the construct of an oligarchic dictatorship. Get used to it, acknowledge it, recognize it, and then decide how you're going to move forward against that. Because the
mhm,
only cure to an oligarchy is trees with strong branches and 1 inch thick ropes. That's how you cure an oligarchy. The Second Amendment is another cure to oppressive oligarchy. When you get to that point, they're not going to change. It is the right of the people to alter and abolish it and then to establish new government.
mhm.
So that,
Absolutely.
you know, that's not something people talk about very much because it's
Mhm,
easier to shrug your shoulders, roll your hands, and say, well, that's just the way they are here. Doesn't, it's because they're not afraid of you. And the reason they have a Second Amendment is so that the government would fear the people, and they have no
mhm.
regard for the people. They act with impunity with the people.
Right. I want to continue on with this conversation and how we're being used as an example to affect the rest of the nation. And we'll continue on with this conversation right after we hear from our sponsor, Be Nourished, the best honey on the planet. Um, so let's go ahead and be nourished.
Honey. It's one of the greatest gifts to man. With millions of wildflowers in every bottle, the nourishing power of honey is still yet to be fully discovered. Be Nourished Healing Products combines healing ingredients from around the planet to the purest honey from the island of Maui to bring magic to your taste buds. The best honey from the most beautiful place to nourish your body, mind, and soul. From our hearts to yours, be nourished.
Okay, and again, please support them. They're just amazing people, amazing sponsors. And when you go to checkout, put in Liberty to get a 22% discount. And if you're interested in becoming a sponsor of Red Time Stories or the Liberty Arise platform, please feel free to contact me at writeasred@pm.me. That's writeasred@pm.me. Local Calvary Church, I'm going to put their information on a banner down below because they're still accepting donations for those who were affected by the Maui fire. And some of the things that they're looking for is mostly like gift cards. So the people can go out. What people don't think about is there's medication that they need to buy or certain dietary requirements. They don't need any more clothes, but there's also school supplies, gas cards. Many people lost their cars and, definitely their homes. So monetary, money would be very helpful for people so that they can get back on their feet or even to hire an attorney. Um, there's many organizations that could use the help too to help get homes where maybe down payments to rebuild their homes as well, where they don't get what we found here too is the insurance companies are not doing those people justice who've lost their homes. They're not giving full market value return on the homes that burned down. They're giving the value of maybe when it was built. So it's a very sad situation, and many people are trying to fight that right now. But I'll put that on the bottom, and then we'll continue on with our conversation with Dan Hunter from Akamai Wealth Management. Um, so so again, there's many things that are going on, and some people know, some people don't. We get questioned, asked all the time, just like from one of our viewers right now who is in South Carolina. What's going on, Tamara? Because we don't really hear the truth of what's going on, and it's very little news that we receive, and so they feel, that when they hear the truth here, it's like it's unbelievable, but it is. It's devastating.
Yes.
And a lot of the things that people don't understand is we've got a lot of heavy hitters, and you have to look at it, and it's no longer conspiracy theories. It's true. You have Zuckerberg, you've got Ellis, you've got Bezos, Oprah, Obama, Bill Gates, Monsanto, etc., along with our governor, he is considered the most powerful governor in the country because he has more power than any other state, any other governor in any other state has, which puts us in this situation. And I think that they're using us as guinea pigs to see how far that they can go. What are your thoughts on that, Dan?
Absolutely. And I am in complete agreement with what you just said. If you're on the mainland, you have no idea. And I don't say that to shame anyone. You can't know. You're not mind readers. You can't know what's going on if you don't hear what's going on. And uh, my friends back in Ohio and all over the United States are in that situation where what they see on the news maybe once a week now is a little 1 or 2 second video of the mess in Lahaina from the original fire day. And then, in other news, how about what's going on with the weather, Bill? And they're done. But when I was talking to a lady in Minnesota at one of my investment houses that I work with, and
Mhm.
I started telling her about the fact that, and please pass this on because we have
Mhm.
to defeat the media who seeks to keep this quiet. And the fact that the media is doing everything they can to shut this up should be a major red flag, a major clue. But I talked with her and I said, well, have you heard about what happened with the water department? No. What was wrong with the water department? Well, have you heard about what happened with Hawaii has the most advanced and there's like over 400 different siren sites for tsunami and hazard warnings in the world. There's nothing in the world that's as advanced as the early warning system in Hawaii. Nothing. And had you hear about how HECO, Hawaiian Electric, raised the rates by 30%, and then they spent the money on diversity, inclusion, and whatever, instead of cleaning up the brush underneath the old antiquated wires that are breaking down, and they could have been making infrastructure changes, and they didn't. And so now you've
Mhm.
got what looks like this perfect storm of plausible deniability, plausible ignorance, when in fact it's just as easy to see that all these people were paid to do and not do certain things that led to this entire fiasco. The the water department idiot Manuel should be brought up on charges of technically voluntary manslaughter, third degree manslaughter, and mass murder. He had the capacity to turn on the water when these poor Lahaina folks were fighting the fire with garden hoses, for crying out loud, and he turned off the water. And that
Mhm.
other jerk who works for the had the ability to turn on the siren and warn people as the fire was bearing down on their homes. And I know I mentioned this last week, but he is so arrogant, and this gets right back into the arrogance of the Hawaiian government in general. This is just a cog in the wheel, a piece of the mainframe that, well, I don't want to wake people up at 3 in the morning. Heck, they could turn around, think it's a tsunami, and run into a 40-foot wall of fire. Like that could happen. I would never, ever. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can lie your way out of something, but to impugn the intelligence of the average Hawaiian as being so damned dumb that if you woke
Mhm.
them up at 3 in the morning, that they would run headlong into a 40-foot tall wall of fire instead of heading for the ocean. Now, I've been around a few fires in my time. I had some service in the police department. I've been around fires and they get hot. When you get within 20 feet of a house fire, you feel it. You don't just see it. And the
Right.
idea that you get anywhere near a 40-foot wall of flame and not know the difference between the threat to your life and heading the other way to find safety is a laughable non starter.
Mhm.
That man should be brought up on charges of negligent manslaughter, third degree, and charged with it. Does anybody know where these clowns are right now? Does anybody have any suspicion that maybe somebody slipped someone an envelope full of $100 bills and a wink, wink, nod, nod, have a nice life?
Mhm.
If you can't find them, they're not here. And there's a
Yeah.
reason why they both resigned within a couple days and bugged out of here like a cockroach on the kitchen floor at 3 a.m. They're gone. Doesn't mean we
Mhm.
can't find them, but it does mean they know what they did. They're
Yeah.
responsible for mass murder. And nobody seems to talk about that, just the same way
Right.
no one seems to talk about anything else involved with Lahaina. A minute and then, a couple seconds on TV at night, and they switch to the weather report, and we all go back to our lives. That's what they want. Pay no attention to the voice behind that curtain.
Mhm. Right.
Oh,
Right, absolutely. And there's several hundreds of missing children still, and the names still haven't been released of the children who are not showing up attending the school, which is one
yeah.
way that they could narrow that down.
And are those children being sold into the sex slavery? Or did they perish in the fire or both? I don't think there's
Mhm,
a good outcome to this. Let's face it. I mean, anybody who has been missing since the fire is now presumed dead. I mean,
mhm.
we're in a high technology age. If you can't find a phone and make a phone call to somebody, it's probably because you just simply can't anymore. You're gone.
Mhm.
So, how in the world is this allowed to stand? I I just have no words.
I know. It's really hard. So what we wanna try and do is, keep the word alive, keep the, silent voices to speak for those silent voices wherever they may be, maybe they're
Yeah.
lost, and give people solutions that don't know what to do.
Mhm.
Shock, not only loss of their home, but loss of family, loss of everything, everything that
You
they
know,
own.
I'm looking at your crawler here underneath about the Calvary Central. That's a church.
Mhm.
Didn't their church burn to the ground?
They have a couple churches. So there was a few churches that burned down in Lahaina.
Yeah. And I know of a couple of other ones that are doing that also. They're still feeding and clothing people. They're still
Mhm.
doing great work.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
doing more
Yeah.
than the government is. And
Yeah.
they've lost everything, but they're still doing what the building means nothing to the effort of that heart.
Oh, no,
They're
they have
still
tents up and they're
standing to
still
the
serving,
commission.
yeah. They're
Yep,
still serving people with their
exactly.
tents. Yeah, FEMA has been an interference and not a supportive entity, to those who are suffering. Um, I
Mhm.
think we have to somehow find a way to, help them get their at least their land back and try and get some effort nationally. I mean, there's modular home companies. It may not be as fancy or as big as their homes were, but there's got to be a way that we at least give them a structure on their house to rebuild and start with, and so that they could get their lands back. We have to fight really hard against this 15-minute city that has been
Yep,
that they've been in discussion with to put in place of Lahaina, and this was already in plan before
yep.
the fires happened. How coincidental is that?
Well, there's no such thing as a coincidence. How many times do you have to be right before dismissing coincidence as a mathematical impossibility? Is
Mhm,
where we are. And all of this, to all of the viewers, listeners out there who are hearing this, we're depending on you to bring this to the forefront because we have
mhm,
no voice. Nobody's listening anymore. The
mhm,
people have, and many of you are just now being exposed here. What was that, August 8th? And now we're on September 15th, 14th. It's been
mhm,
5 weeks ago this happened. And you are completely out in left field with any comprehension of what's going on. They're not breaking ground. They're not building new homes. There's not lumber being shipped in to build things. There's not any, what's his name? Megala Green talked about changing
mhm,
the building codes to enhance and expedite new housing, but we haven't seen anything. It's lip service. It's all lip
mhm,
service. They want to stall you into frustration and just have you quit and walk away. That's what they want you to do. And
mhm,
the idea that somebody can come in here and offer you $500,000 for your property with nothing on it is somehow amoral as far as Ige is concerned, but he can come in and offer you pennies on the dollar and take your property from you. And what's he buying it with? He doesn't have any money. The state of Hawaii doesn't have any money. Hey, we've got a train to build. What's wrong with you? Take
Mhm.
here this token offering and be darn glad that we're giving you that because we've got important things to do because we're important people and you're feeding us. So take this and just shut up and go away. That's what it's heading to. People
And
can only.
then yeah, so with this being with this happening and so forth, do you feel like it's part of a much bigger agenda? Where we're seeing the manufactured meats, the mRNA vaccine that's being injected into the cells and growths of like lettuce and other fruits and vegetables.
Yes, absolutely. There is a strategic tactical plan afoot through the World Economic Forum and the New World Order. And I know, put on your tinfoil hats, everybody, but you'd better get used to it. It's the truth.
Mhm.
If you don't believe that this isn't a coordinated effort to destroy humanity and enslave those of us who survive, you are asleep. Again, sorry to wake you. We'll talk more quietly so you can return to your slumber. They're trying to kill you. And if you survive, they want to enslave you. They want to take the world. You remember the Georgia Guidestones, Tamara?
Mhm.
Google the Georgia Guidestones, people. State of Georgia, Guidestones. The Georgia Guidestones were assembled about 20 some years ago. I think I can't remember, back in the 80s. And they're solid granite monolithic slabs that have 8 points of the New World Order objectives. And right on that list, and it's written in 8 languages, and there's some other little clever things like at certain times of the year, a light beam will pass through 2 holes and illuminate some other thing. But the objective is to reduce the population to about a 500 million people. Well, where do you suppose these people are going to live? It reminds
Mhm.
me of the James Bond movie. You remember with Dr. No? And he's laying
Oh,
on a plate of steel
yeah.
and there's a laser that's moving up and he's going to cut James Bond in half from the crotch up. And Bond says, "How do you expect me to live through this? I don't expect you to live, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die." And that's the evil of all of this. They expect you to die. That's what their objectives have been plainly stated as. No, we're not going to colonize Mars with your worthless butts. We're going to
Mhm.
kill you. And those of you who we can't kill, we're going to enslave. So
Which
you're spot on. You're entirely correct. This is a concerted effort to destroy the world as we know it. And nothing happens until we fall. Once the United States fails, they will move on the rest of the world quicker than X-Lax and a 12-year-old.
well,
Did I say
um
that?
um so again, when we talk about what is going on, but I really want to continue on solutions and ideas because again,
Yeah.
people don't know what to do. And so again, I know that some of the things that we need to do is, talk about sustainability and, making your own gardens so that the bartering system. But some people don't have their land anymore. They're being bought out. That's being
Mhm.
taken away.
Yeah.
The monies are gone. They're being depleted. So it's just like, how do we give hope to those where hope was taken away?
The only thing that we can do other than the obvious, and that's to pray
Is
for
praying.
them, is to support them ourselves. And that
Hmm.
is the beautiful thing that we have seen from Hawaiians to Hawaiians is that
Hmm.
support. You know, the fleets of privately owned vessels that are coming from Big Island and other parts of Maui and Molokai and bringing in the goods and kerosene and fuel and generators and food and water and everything that they're needed is being floated into private ports where
Hmm.
FEMA can't interfere. and then distributed through private distribution centers and mechanics. And those are the things that we have to continue doing. The difficulty of being an island archipelago is that we're an island archipelago. You know, if I live in Cleveland and I need to help somebody in Columbus, I get in my car and 2 hours later I'm in Columbus. That's not how it works here. If there's no
Yeah.
jets or travel uh, to this part of Hawaii, it's extremely difficult to coordinate anything. And even if you do go, it's not like you can load up your trunk. You're allowed one suitcase
Hmm.
generally when you get on commercial air travel. So there's a lot of challenges to that. And there there is also, as far as ideas as to what to do to help with this, is that we need to talk more. And
Hmm.
that's the part that we really don't have any control over. And perhaps people haven't considered that, but we need to talk with each other. If you're attending church, you need to be talking about this, and you need to be
Hmm.
loud about it. And if someone tries to quiet you, you need to quiet them, because that's exactly why the church exists, is to care for each other. And if this isn't a moment that the churches must rise, there won't be another moment. So I can see the churches as being the most logical and capable ways of beginning to solve this. And I know things are tough all over, but there's certainly no reasons why even small steps are better than no steps at all. And it's not that difficult to reach out and coordinate with, like, Calvary Chapel, and the Lahaina Baptist Church is another one that I know about. And these churches are capable of doing
Hmm.
great things. Work with them and help them do great things. But we also need to act in accordance to our constitutional capacities in making changes. This can only succeed against us if we do nothing. And inertia is our enemy, the tendency of a body motionless to remain motionless. Inertia is also a body of motion's tendency to stay in motion. It works both ways, folks. But we need to talk with each other and strategically begin to stand up together and take those steps forward, one at a time, to make that difference and to change the pathway of where we are to where we want to
Yes.
be.
And unfortunately, it is the leadership in government that has put us in this position. And so it does become political no matter how you look at it, you can't avoid it. So I try to encourage people, like I said, set aside, the new role that I'm in. I've always said this, regardless, is now it's time to stand up, focus on election integrity, and overwhelm the polls when it's time to vote, so you can get as many people there to overwhelm the voting boxes, so that it's so much percentage over the amount that they try to, let's say,
Cheat by.
manipulate the system. And the other thing is it's time for everybody to get up, and start running for office, especially county council, because the only way to beat a billionaire, if you're not a billionaire, is to run for office and change legislation, change the laws, um,
Yes,
and take away tyrannical power and dictatorship power, because it is about the people. That's what our country, for the United States, was built on. We were built by the people, for the people. And the only way that we
exactly.
can save it is if we, the people, become united and stand united as one before it's too late. Because once it's too late, there's nothing that we can do.
We are in charge, folks. It's our dealio.
Hmm.
It runs the way we say it runs, and we've been saying nothing. So
Hmm.
we have no one to blame but ourselves in this regard. But we're also the agents of change. That should be our objective, is to evoke change in our own
Mhm.
mentality and the thinking of other people, that we don't have to live the way we've been living as subjects in the freest nation on earth. We are not subjects, we are citizens. As such, we need to act like
One nation under God. I mean, I can't
it. Yes.
end any better than that, which is, we have pretty much come to the end of the show. And I mean, that was a great closing, but I mean, if you want to go ahead and make of the last closing remark and give a contact of how people can get a hold of you, that would be great.
Yes, it would. Thank you very much. Um, I am Dan Turner, Akamai Wealth Management. My phone number is 808-464-5292. I specialize in wealth management and dead money, and I am a safe money advisor, meaning we live in perilous times. And when you begin looking around you and you realize the scope of all of the risks and exposures that you have to losing your money, especially if you're getting near retirement, there are ways of protecting your wealth and enhancing your yield, which means, in plain English, earning higher yields because you're safe, not in spite of being safe. Safety matters, and the loss of premium or loss of your investments, losses hurt you far more than gains can ever help. Slow and steady wins the race, even if you don't think you have time. You do. It's that efficient. So please call. I do risk analysis. One of my main benefits for you would be measuring the standard deviation in your portfolio, because many of you don't have any idea what that means, but you darn well should, because the higher your deviation, the more risk you're taking. And that does not mean your reward is equal to the risk. It just means you're taking more risk. Reduce your risk, increase your reward, and know what your investments are supposed to do. Call me today. Again, 808-464-5292. Akamai Wealth Management is a registered investment advisor. I am the principal advisor, and my CRD is 322-422 if you want to look me up. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm still going to work on you running for county council. You know that, Dan, right?
I'm off
So
island a lot.
that's
Yeah,
okay. They're actually on island, but never here.
yeah. Even
So
when they're here, they're
anyway,
not here.
okay. Well, awesome. Thank you again, and hope to see you back again next week. You're always welcome, and we'll
Indeed.
continue this conversation about what's going on in Maui, Hawaii, and bringing out all the other items that we need to talk about that people need to hear locally and nationally. So thank you again, Dan, and I will see you
Yes,
again next week, right? Same bat time, same bat
indeed.
channel every Thursday at three
Same
o'clock
bat
Hawaii
station.
Standard Time.
Thank you. Aloha,
Thank you, Dan.
everybody. Have a great weekend.
Oh, aloha. Again, thank you everyone for joining in to Redtime Stories every Thursday, as I said, at 3 p.m. Just trying to bring some information to you. And anytime you want to hear a topic or you have any questions, please email me at writeasred@pm.me. That's writeasred@pm.me. And we are out there to fight corruption, bring information, find solutions. And I really appreciate again everyone tuning in and all of your support. And just remember always, the truth has no fear.